Imagine a young man who has grown up almost entirely in the quiet corners of royal life, far from scandal, far from headlines, and far from the pressures that often accompany a famous surname. And then, one morning, everything changes. His name, his role, and even the way the world sees him shifts in an instant. That young man is James, formerly Viscount Severn, now Earl of Wessex. And today, we explore not only the moment he received his new title, but the extraordinary family dynamics, history, and symbolism that make this transformation far more meaningful than it first appears. Stay with me until the end, because the deeper you go into this story, the more you'll see how one understated royal is quietly stepping into a legacy crafted over decades, and why his title carries a weight few outside the palace walls fully understand. Today's video will unravel the significance of James's newly inherited title, explore the unique upbringing that shaped him, reveal how this moment connects to the late Queen Elizabeth's wishes, and look at what this means for the future of the monarchy. And there's a twist in the middle you won't want to miss, so keep watching. James Alexander Philip Theo Mountbatten Windsor was born in December 2007, the second child of Prince Edward and Sophie. From the beginning, his parents made a deliberate choice, one that set James apart from most of his royal cousins. Although he could have been styled as His Royal Highness Prince James of Edinburgh, they chose an entirely different path. They asked that he simply grow up as Lord James, with the courtesy title Viscount Severn. It was a quiet decision, but a powerful one. A promise that their children would have the chance to live as normally as possible, with school routines, family life, and privacy prioritized over ceremony. This approach aligned perfectly with Prince Edward's own character. As the youngest child of Queen Elizabeth II, Edward had watched the monarchy transform through decades of public expectation and media intrusion. His life at Bagshot Park has been defined by duty, modesty, and consistent hard work. Sophie, now Duchess of Edinburgh, brought warmth and grounded intelligence to the royal family, becoming one of its most trusted and steady presences. James and his sister Lady Louise grew up in that quiet orbit, shaped not by palace grandeur, but by a gentle, stable home life, anchored in long walks, low-key hobbies, and a strong sense of responsibility. And yet, whether he wished it or not, James always stood in the shadow of a title that would one day be his. When Queen Elizabeth passed away in 2022, her youngest son's destiny shifted, but it wasn't until 2023 that the change became official. King Charles III granted Prince Edward the title Duke of Edinburgh, fulfilling a plan shaped years earlier by Prince Philip and supported wholeheartedly by the late Queen. It was more than a ceremonial elevation. It acknowledged Edward's decades of service and his leadership of the Duke of Edinburgh's award, the programme Philip had poured his heart into. And with Edward becoming Duke of Edinburgh, something else quietly happened. James, still a teenager, became the new Earl of Wessex. No formal announcement, no balcony wave, just a quiet, traditional transfer of title, marked by a subtle update on the royal family's website. Yet the symbolism is immense. The Earldom of Wessex is one of the most evocative titles in English history, stretching back to the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. In modern times, it became inseparable from Edward and Sophie's identity, and now it belongs to their son. For a young man who has lived far from attention, this marks the beginning of a gentle but meaningful shift, from a private figure to someone the public will gradually notice. To understand why this title suits him so well, we must look more closely at the environment that shaped him. Bagshot Park, their home, is at the heart of the family's world. A 120-room mansion surrounded by 51 acres of gardens, forest, and quiet pathways. It has long been a sanctuary for the Edinburghs. Edward and Sophie live there in understated comfort, renting the property on a 150-year lease, an arrangement that reflects their responsible, practical approach to royal privilege. The estate is grand, but life inside it is calm and unpretentious. James grew up fishing on the lake, cycling through secluded trails, and practicing the kind of privacy that most royals can only dream of. Titles were scarcely used within the home, and despite the estate's size, the children were raised with routines that felt remarkably down to earth. But James is not just any teenager. His new title places him in a lineage that stretches across centuries and positions him within the modern monarchy in a subtle, thoughtful way. So what does becoming Earl of Wessex actually mean? Historically, the title carried regional authority, but today its meaning is symbolic, rooted in continuity, service, and heritage. It carries echoes of the late Queen's own vision, a slimmed-down monarchy focused on duty rather than grandeur. Edward and Sophie embodied this vision through hundreds of engagements, charitable work, and quiet consistency. The late Queen is widely believed to have wanted their children to live largely private lives, stepping forward when necessary but never trapped by public duty. James's title sits precisely in that space. It acknowledges lineage without imposing expectation. It places him within the royal story, but leaves his future open. He may choose a private career, like his cousins Peter Phillips and Lady Louise, or he may support his parents' charities and eventually his father's work with the Duke of Edinburgh's award. What do you think James's role should be as the new Earl of Wessex, a fully public royal or a private citizen with a historical title? Share your opinion in the comments. Let's turn now to the emotional significance of this moment. The Wessex titles have long been intertwined with Prince Philip's legacy. When Edward married Sophie in 1999, Philip reportedly suggested the Earldom of Wessex, a title Edward would hold until inheriting the Duke of Edinburgh title. The plan was always for the earldom to pass to Edward's son one day. Now that day has come, and James becomes, quietly and without fuss, the living bearer of a piece of his grandfather's legacy. For the family, titles are more than ceremony. They are threads that connect generations. Philip was known for his discipline, humour, and unwavering commitment to service. Edward shares those qualities, and Sophie has often been compared to Philip in her resilience. For their son to become Earl of Wessex ties all those qualities together. What kind of young man is James? From the rare public glimpses, he appears calm, polite, and thoughtful. At Queen Elizabeth's funeral, he carried himself with a maturity beyond his years. He is close to Lady Louise, who, like him, has grown up mostly outside the public eye. Together, they represent a quieter, more grounded generation of royals. It's also important to understand what this title does not mean. When Prince Edward becomes the next Duke of Edinburgh, the title will not pass to James. King Charles granted the dukedom as a life title, meaning it ends with Edward. This protects the monarchy from expanding too widely while still honouring Edward's service. Instead, the Earldom of Wessex becomes the hereditary title that anchors this branch of the family. James now carries a name that will follow him throughout his life, symbolising history, duty, and continuity, without binding him to a future he did not choose. As we near the end of this story, keep listening, because this final piece is something few people know. Inside the royal family, James's new title signals the beginning of the next generation of the Edinburgh household. Edward and Sophie have spent years building a legacy of charity through the Duke of Edinburgh's award, the National Youth Theatre, London Youth, and the British Paralympic Association. Their work affects tens of thousands each year. When the time comes for Edward to step back, it may be James, now Earl of Wessex, who carries aspects of that legacy into the future. Whether he chooses a public role or a private career, the foundation has been laid. And in the traditional style of the Edinburgh family, this new chapter began quietly. A simple title update, unnoticed by most, marking the start of a new era. James, the new Earl of Wessex, may not seek the spotlight, but sometimes the most compelling stories belong to those who live just beyond its edge, steady, grounded, and quietly preparing for what comes next.